Hi, today we're going to be talking about a lot of little changes that come into our life in second half of life that we need to evaluate and make choices about whether it's going to be something that is the new normal or if it's something we need to make the effort to change. So let's get started. Welcome to this further journey. My name is Jeanette Slater, and this is a channel where we talk about all the things that come into our life in second half of life that are different than first half of life. And how do we negotiate those and decide to make a better life for ourselves? Change is a part of life. That's true. The challenge is, in first half of life, a lot of those changes, especially some of the big ones, we choose. We choose if we're going to go to college and move out of home. We choose what job we're going to take up. We choose if we're going to get married. We choose if we're going to have kids. Those are huge changes, but they're largely changes that we decided we wanted to make. In second half of life, too often those changes come at us unbidden and often unwelcome. And when those changes hit us, we need to make some decisions, especially in the early part of second half of life, when we still have a lot of agency. We still have a lot of power to be able to make those changes. Sometimes when a change happens, we do have to accept it as the new normal. For example, when our parents die, that often shifts our identity, it shifts how we do life, and we're not going back. So that's an example of where we just have to accept the new normal and move into this new space. But sometimes those changes come around and we do have a choice. And we can say, no, that's not going to be part of this further journey, at least right now. But that takes effort. Actually, both of those take effort, whether we're adjusting to the new normal or whether we decide to make some changes so that what we're experiencing is not what's going to continue to be a part of our life. So let's talk about some of those things. One of the arenas where we experience some of that change is in our home. A lot of house maintenance can become overwhelming, and we need to make some choices about that. For example, if you like to garden, that's great. And when you retire, you're very excited that you get to work in your garden and maybe get to work in your flower beds more. And that's energizing for you. For others, especially if you have a large garden, there comes a day when you say, you know what? I just don't know that I'm willing to continue that. Maybe it's because of body aches and pains. Maybe it's because other choices that you have that you decide that's no longer going to be a part of my life. I have 2 4x4 feet square gardens, so it's pretty small, and I continue to do that for now. But there may come a day when I decide, you know what? It's time to make that change. Another change I see happening with people in second half of life is around the whole chore of cooking and cleaning. We get tired of cooking every single day. And sometimes people resort to going to the grocery store and buying manufactured prefab food that they can just put in the microwave or put in the oven. And it tastes great and it's easy, but you have to make a choice about that because it will impact your health. So my choice would be to eat more simply rather than buy manufactured food. But that's a choice you have to make. Also, cleaning. Why is cleaning consistently something that needs to happen? It's kind of wearisome. And we can decide that we're going to hire somebody to do it if we have the means. And it's not terribly expensive. And maybe just once a month, somebody comes in and does a deep clean. That's okay. I may get to that point. Right now, I feel like I can do my own cleaning. When some of these chores become overwhelming, we may decide we can't do it anymore and we need to move. Maybe move into a smaller home that takes less cleaning, or we may want to move somewhere where, like a condo or a townhouse, where the outside is always taken care of for us. That's a choice that we can make. Another arena where we see a lot of change is in our social life. In first half of life, because we're so engaged in working and maybe being a part of different groups, our social life kind of comes naturally. But in second half of life, sometimes those natural situations are decreased, like if we're not going to work every day, or maybe you went to church primarily because you wanted your kids to go to Sunday school, so you went to Sunday school and you had social interactions, and some of those people may have become very good friends. And then the kids left home and you decided, you know what, I don't want to go to Sunday school anymore. And you lose some of those social interactions. And sometimes it's just because of our diminished energy, where, I just don't have the energy tonight to go to the group that I've been going to. So I think I'll just stay home. Or maybe because of our eyesight, we don't want to drive at night. So then we start missing opportunities to interact with people because we stay home in the evening instead of engaging. It can become too easy to become isolated. I was talking to a woman who works in a retirement center, and she says the number one complaint that she hears from people and the challenge that they have is that they are lonely. I'm sure you've heard of that too. That doesn't happen all of a sudden. And in second half of life, we need to make some choices to stay connected to people. Maybe it's making the effort to email or call or text a friend. Maybe invite them out to coffee or to lunch so that you keep up those connections. And how about making new friends? That can be difficult, especially if you're an introvert like me. So what do we do then? Well, it takes effort. Recently, I thought there's a couple of women I've really been wanting to get together with, but they aren't calling me. They aren't asking for time. And I thought, I just need to make the effort. I need to text them, call them, and say, when can we get together? And I'm looking forward to doing that. Maybe it's intentionally joining a small group that is an interest group of yours. Or maybe it's volunteering somewhere where you rub shoulders with other people who are interested in some of the same things you are. You can also create a small group. When we moved to town 3 years ago, we had some scattered friends, and we decided we were going to start a dinner club. And so once a month, we get together for supper at somebody's house. Whoever is hosting provides the main dish, and then we all bring complimentary dishes and desserts that can make it a full meal. And we feast well, but we also tell stories. Usually we have an instigating question that has all of us sharing about our lives in a way that maybe we wouldn't. I always come away from those gatherings encouraged and feeling closer to my community. So you could do that. It doesn't take much. I have a friend who's in a church, and they've created that for people where you can sign up to be in a dinner group. It's called 9 to Dine, and I love that they have an odd number in the group because of singles. 9 to Dine, and they meet once a month, again, in the same kind of way, where it's a potluck, where everybody brings something to share. And this is a way to get to know new people. They switched out those groups about once a year. So you really have time to get to know people. And then the next year you get to know some new people. Making friends is a skill. And if we don't hone that skill as we move into second half of life, it won't become easier when we enter our fourth quarter. So start now to do that. Make a choice rather than just slipping into sitting on your couch and watching TV. I want to encourage you to push out your social connections now while you still have energy, while you can still drive, so that farther down the pike, you still have friends. And speaking of social interactions, family. Now there's a sticky one, right? All our families are different, and how close we are is probably in part a function of years and years of interactions. I know some families who are very close. They do everything together. They live close to each other. They celebrate holidays together on a regular basis. But others, their family is kind of scattered and everybody's been living their own life. And by the time we get to second half of life, we're kind of out of touch with some of our family, some of our siblings. Another thing that affects that, at least we've found in our family, is when the parents pass on, because they were the ones that were kind of calling the family together. And when they are no longer around to do that, some of the family traditions kind of slip. Add to that health challenges or philosophical differences, and it can be easy just not to make the effort to stay in touch, especially with our siblings. When we were deciding where to move 3 years ago, we decided to move back to where I had lived 30 years earlier. Both my brothers lived in town, and I wanted to be sure to be closer to them. So that was a choice I made in order to be more in touch with my siblings. Now, it's not always that easy. Sometimes years have gone by and you don't have the contact, but you can turn that around. And I encourage you to do that, to make that choice, because I think it's important in second half of life that we have good relationships as much as possible with our extended family. So how do we do that? Very simply, we can text each other just to stay in touch, or we can decide to go on a vacation together. I've done that with my brothers, or you can decide to visit them. So in the winter, when we head south, we like to see my husband's brothers because they live south of here. So we make it a point to try and connect with them, even if it's just for a day, just briefly. That's okay. We can do that, and we do. And here's one of the biggies. Change in second half of life is our health. Our health begins to change. I certainly experienced that in my 50s and 60s. I have a very healthy constitution, and really I took my health for granted my whole life. I could eat whatever I wanted to eat. I didn't have a weight problem. I was very active. I was hiking mountains and canyons, and I took my health for granted. But in my 50s, that began to change, and I began to have aches and pains that I couldn't account for. The first one was in my early 50s, and my left hip began to ache so badly I could hardly go up the stairs. So I had to decide, is this old age, just bursitis or arthritis or whatever tag you want to put on it, or is it something else? I figured out it was inflammation, and inflammation was something I had a choice about. And so I began to make changes that weren't easy, but I can tell you, I can now walk and hike mountains again. It was worth the effort. It took years, but I figured if I was experiencing inflammation in one part of my body, it was probably starting in another part of my body. I just hadn't felt it yet. So I made some hard choices about what I was eating and when I was eating in order to address that. That was the choice I made. Another shift in our body that I'm guessing you've probably experienced as well is weight. Our weight seems to just start to slowly climb upward in second half of life. For women after menopause, this is a serious problem. Sometimes it feels like there's nothing we can do about it. This is just part of second half of life. But I'm here to tell you we can do something about it. I'd also say at 70, losing weight is really hard. So if you're in your 50s and 60s, start now. Weight isn't just about how it looks. It impacts our health, especially if we're gaining visceral fat, which is the kind of fat that throws off all kinds of particles that create more inflammation. And so then we feel more achy and more sore, and we start doing less, and we're sitting on the couch more, because at one point I had to make a decision, is it worth getting up from the couch and all the pain that I would feel from getting up off the couch? And frankly, there were some times I thought, no, I'm just going to sit here. But I kept making progress, and now I am largely pain-free. Along with that is keeping our muscles active, whether it's walking, whether it's going to the gym. I just got a rebounder, one of those mini trampolines, because I want to keep active any way I can. That is critical for our health, and I'll be talking more about that in further videos. But we have choices to make about how our health progresses in second half of life. We can accept it as the new normal. Oh, well, I'm just gaining weight. Oh, well, I'm more achy now than I used to be. Or we have some choices about what we can do to limit our weight gain and to increase our active life. I think one of the biggest challenges in second half of life is our diet, because we've been eating a certain way all our life. Like I said, in my first half of life, I could eat anything I wanted, anytime, anywhere, and I did not feel the repercussions. But in second half of life, that was no longer true. And so I had to make some serious choices about my diet. I began to reduce my carbs. I began to increase the protein that I was eating, and that worked for my body. But you have to decide what's going to work for your body. I also changed when I eat. So my usual habit now is to quit eating by 8 o'clock in the evening, and then I don't eat again until noon the next day. And those 16 to 18 hours really allows my body to regulate and be ready for lunch when it comes. So how about you? What changes have you experienced as you've moved into second half of life? And what are some of the decisions you've made in the process? What have you accepted as the new normal? And what are some things that you've decided, no, I'm not going to settle for that. I'm going to make some decisions differently. I'd love to hear how your journey is going. So put it in the comments and let me know. And let's start a discussion about this. So until next time, have a great second half of life.